in the Bible? Very first thing that happened.
There's nothing.
God made the earth. Very good. It's the most obvious answer, but it's the most elusive answer. Before you start anything, you need it to be there. And before God created anything, the earth was this formless void. It was just this watery blob of darkness. I don't know how many of you are into Star Wars, but can you remember the water planets that they made like the clone troopers in? I picture it as that, except even bleaker, because there's no buildings, there's no formation, it's just this watery, just darkness. And then all of a sudden, God speaks. He says, the first thing, let there be light. And what was there? Light. And then God spoke again, and he said, let's make the day and the night. So the sun was in charge of the day, the moon was in charge of
The night.
the night. Very, very good. So that's how we get the day and night. And then, like I said, water covered everything, and God said that's kind of boring. Let's put some dry land out there. So he makes land. And then he said, wow, still there's not enough stuff on this land. We have to create animals. We have to create the fish. We have to create trees. And so on and so on. And then God is almost done with creation. And he says, I need some help. So he makes. Who does he make to help him out and take care of the earth? Adam. Very, very good. But then he sees Adam, he said, well, Adam probably needs a helper. So he tries to see if there's an animal that can help out Adam, all these things. And finally, what does God create to be a helper? Eve, male and female. This is the image of God. When you see God, the image of God is male and female working together. This is the very first thing in all of creation that is not good, is that man should be alone. People are not meant to be alone, they're meant to be and work together. So we have that. And then we have the first human beings, we have Adam and Eve, and they have two sons. What happens with the two sons? Cain and Abel. Cain does what to Abel? He kills him. So we have the very first murder. Things aren't going so well. They keep going really, really bad. And God had finally had it. He said, I'm going to flood. I'm going to destroy everything. I'm sick of it. And then he sees one man. And who's that man's name before he floods everything? Noah. Very, very good. He tells Noah to build a spaceship. An ark. Very good. Tells Noah to build an ark. So he builds an ark and brings animals, two of every kind, onto the ark. So you have Noah, his family, all the animals saved. But there's utter destruction. So God starts new again. And then we get to the point where God says, you know what? I'm going to work through a family. I'm going to go to a specific person who has a family, or he doesn't have a family yet, but I'll give him a family. And that guy's name is Abraham. Very, very good. So you have Abraham, Father Abraham, and then he had a son. He was married to Abraham and Sarah. Abraham and Sarah, they have a son named him Isaac, because the name Isaac means laughter, because Sarah laughed because when she found out she was going to give birth to Isaac, she was about 90 years old. So they named him Laughter. So, named him Laughter. He grows up, and everything seems to be going really, really well, until one day God tells Abraham to do what to Isaac?
Kill him.
Sacrifice. Yep, kill him, sacrifice him. Then Abraham does it, but at the very last second, God stops it and provides a ram or a goat that will take away the sins. The ram or the goat. So Isaac grows up, has two sons, named, and they're twins. You have Jacob and Esau. Which one of the two is the oldest? Esau is the oldest, not by much. Then you have Jacob is the youngest, but he is grabbing Esau's heel on their way out. So as years pass and Isaac gets old and it's time for him to give his birthright, his blessing, who always gets a blessing? Oldest brother. Why not, if the oldest child is a female, what? Is it female? No. They don't matter. Exactly. That's changed. It definitely changes. More on that when we start going over the New Testament and how radically it changes. But for now, we have Esau being the oldest male. He should get it. Who ends up getting it? Jacob. He cheats his brother. Jacob goes on, and he has his own family. He wrestles with a divine being and is given a new name. What is the new name that's given to Jacob? Israel. Very, very good. Israel is the name. And Israel, how many of you have heard the name Israel even before confirmation? What is it?
Place.
It's a place. It's a country. It's a people. So the nation traces their founding, well, to Abraham for sure, but the first citizen of Israel is Jacob. And Jacob has 12 sons. How many daughters? We don't know exactly. Because why? They don't matter. Unfortunately, we know one of the daughters' names. His name is Dinah. We're not going to talk a lot about it. It was a bad situation, and if you want to read about it, it is in Genesis 34. And Dinah's brothers, which he has, how many of? 12 brothers. Avenge the death. So, there are two children. Rachel is Jacob or Israel's favorite wife, but she only has two boys, Joseph and Benjamin. And it's when she gives birth to Benjamin that Rachel dies. So you have Rachel, Benjamin, near and dear to Jacob's heart, but also Joseph. So we are going to center now on Joseph and his brothers. So Joseph was one of the younger brothers. Who is he going to get the blessing?
No.
He shouldn't, because he's one of the younger brothers. But one day he has a dream that basically all of his brothers and his dad were bowing down and worshiping him. And you would think he would keep it quiet, but he doesn't. He tells his brothers, one day you're going to worship me. How would you take it if you told your brothers, one day you will worship me?
Tell my brothers that all the time.
Yeah, they really don't like him. He's a horrible person. He's not the best person. I probably wouldn't want to think of myself as being friends with Joseph. But he's a daddy's boy. He is a daddy's boy. So, his dad gives him what? Oh, any clues why Joseph might be the favorite of Jacob's sons? I just gave you a hint a little while ago. Any clue why? All right. Jacob had two wives, Leah and Rachel. Rachel has two sons, the oldest of which is Joseph, and the youngest is Benjamin. Rachel was Jacob's favorite. So if Rachel is Jacob's favorite, the oldest male son of Rachel is who? Joseph. So this is why Joseph is his favorite. So one day he gives to him a coat. And what does this coat look like? dye a coat, it was expensive to have dye. But it was given to him. So things go from bad to worse, and the brothers cannot stand their brother Joseph. They can't stand them, so they plot and they said, let's kill him. So they get him out. They get them out away from their dad, and they said, you know what? Why don't we just throw him down into a pit, and then we will tell that our dad that, you know, Joseph was killed by a wild animal. Good plan? Good plan? No, it's not a good. It might work, but it's not a nice plan. They wanted to leave him for dead. But then all of a sudden, they see a trade group and they get an even better idea. Why just leave him for dead when we can sell him and make some money? We'll still tell our dad that he was devoured by a wild animal, but he'll be sold and he'll be living far away. By the time our dad dies, Joseph won't appear anymore. We'll be done with him. We'll be done with him. We'll make some money. Our lives will be great. So they do that. What do you think Jacob is like when he's told that his son was killed? His favorite son. Incredibly sad. Incredibly sad. But then eventually Joseph finds his way to working for the Pharaoh. He works his way up, and the Pharaoh has a wife whose name is Potiphar. And Potiphar likes Joseph. She likes him. She wants more than just a servant relationship with him. She really likes Joseph. Do you think Joseph falls for it? No. You say you're married. I'm not interested. But there's one time where she has just had it with Joseph, and she gets a hold of Joseph. Joseph says no, and he rips part of her robe. But when she tells Pharaoh, she says, Pharaoh, he tried to attack me. He tried to attack me. And Pharaoh has him thrown into prison. Well, he's in prison unjustly because Joseph is totally innocent. He finds out he's pretty good with interpreting dreams. And this is the dreams of two prisoners. If you have your Bibles, open them up to page 40. Page number 40. All right. Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker offended the Lord, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them into custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he waited on them. And they continued for some time in custody. One night, they both dreamed. The cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt were confined in the prison, each his own dream, and each dream with its own meaning. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled. So he asked Pharaoh's officers, who were with them in custody, why are your faces down today? And they said to him, we've had dreams, and there was no one to interpret them. And Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me. So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, in my dreams there was a vine before me, and on the vine were three branches. As soon as it budded, its blossoms came out, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, and I pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Then Joseph said to him, this is the interpretation. 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift you up and restore you to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup on his hand, just as as you did when you were cupbearer. But remember me as well, and please and get me out of this place. For in fact, I was stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and I also done nothing that should have put me into the dungeon. Now when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, I also had a dream, that there were three cakes. There were three cake baskets on my head. In the uppermost basket were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating out of the basket on my head. And then Joseph answered, this is the interpretation. The three baskets are 3 days, and within 3 days Pharaoh will lift up you from your head from you, and hang you on a pole, and the birds will eat the flesh from you. So one favorable dream, one probably not so favorable, right? Cupbearer got a favorable dream, baker had a totally different thing, both in 3 days. On the third day, all these things came to pass. Joseph was exactly right. The cupbearer got his job back, the baker lost his head, literally. So, 2 dreams, both correct. The cupbearer that Joseph said, tell Pharaoh about me. Do you think he tells Pharaoh about him? No. No, somehow in the excitement of everything, he forgets. He forgets about the person who gave him hope and the person who interpreted his dreams until one day Pharaoh has a crazy dream. Pharaoh has a crazy dream, and he goes to the wise men in his court, and they say, we have no idea what this dream means. Nobody does. And Pharaoh was so upset because it was such a crazy dream, he knows it means something incredibly important. Then, all of a sudden, the cupbearer overhears this conversation and said, hey, wait a minute. I have a person you might want to talk to. There's this guy Joseph down in prison who interpreted my dream, and I'm still here in the baker's dream, but you probably forgot about him. Then Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was hurriedly brought out of the dungeon. And then Pharaoh told them this dream. I've had a dream, and that there's nobody that can interpret it. I have heard it said that when you hear a dream, Joseph, you can interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh, it is not I, but God will give. Notice this. Joseph is learning. As Joseph is humbled in prison, he is learning that it is not about me, Joseph, but instead what God will do through me. And hopefully you guys can get out of these stories of the Bible. These are your stories. It's not necessarily about you. It is about what God will do through you. And it is amazing and it is exciting. And when God does that through you, don't take the credit for yourself. Give the glory to God. So, Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream I was standing on the banks of the Nile. 7 cows, fat and sleek, came up out of the Nile and fed on the reed grass. Then 7 other cows came up after them, very ugly and thin. Never have I seen such ugly ones in all the land of Egypt. The thin and ugly cows ate up the fat first 7 cows. But when they had eaten, no one would have known that they had done so, for they were still as ugly as before. Then I awoke. I fell asleep a second time. I saw in my dream 7 ears of grain, full and good, growing on the stalk. And then I saw 7 ears withered, thin, blighted by the east wind sprouting up after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears, but when I told it to the magicians, there was no one who could explain it to me. Does everybody know what the interpretation is? Joseph said, there will be 7 years when the farming will be good. There will be 7 years of plenty, good weather, all of that. But that's the good news. The bad news is those 7 good years will be followed by 7 really, really bad years where you won't get anything. So, it is important, Joseph said, that during the 7 good years, you don't just feed people as much as they want. You store up enough from the harvest that you will have enough for 7 more years when there will be nothing. So use those 7 years to take care of 14 years. That was his advice to Pharaoh. And you think Pharaoh followed it? He did. Pharaoh followed it. And things went well. When things, in 7 years, things were going great. They were taking in record harvest. All that stuff. It was wonderful, but Pharaoh remembered, and Joseph was placed in charge of when they brought in the harvest of storing some of the grain for the 7 bad years. So all of a sudden they had 7 good years, and then bam! All of a sudden, 7 bad years follow. Everybody in the known world was hurting, except for Egypt, because Joseph had interpreted this dream and advised them in this amazing way. They were set. They were in great shape. So again, Joseph kept getting promoted all the way from the dungeon to Pharaoh's right-hand man. Pharaoh leaned on him to be one of his most trusted advisors. So like I said, everything is going well in Egypt, but where's Joseph's family from? Yeah, they're from Israel, from Canaan, from that, not from Egypt. The brothers, though, happen to hear that Egypt has a lot of food. And they said, let's just go there. Let's go there. They think their brother Joseph is long gone. And back in those days, the advisors of the king really are done up. They have elaborate clothes, a headdress, they wear makeup. So the Joseph, the brothers left behind, does not look the same. It has been maybe about 20 years. He looks totally different. But when they go to Egypt, they have to talk to him. They don't know it's him. But guess what? Joseph finds out it's his brothers. So what would you do? Not give him the stuff? But also remember, Joseph asked about his dad. Do you have a father? And he said the father's still alive. So he said, all right, I will send some grain back with you. So he sends some grain back with them. They come back, and then Joseph has another good idea. He said, I'm going to get back to them and make sure my dad and my younger brother, Benjamin, get down here too. So what he does is he gives them the grain again, and then he puts some money in some of the grain sacks. So they head off again, back to their home, and Joseph says, wait, they've stolen some money. They've stolen some goods from me. Have they? No, he planted it there. So they bring him back, and they said, I've had you thrown in jail. And the brother said, no, our father would be heartbroken. He said, okay, this is what you can do for me. Bring your brother Benjamin back here. So they do that. So then the whole family's down there. They're in front of Joseph, and Joseph reveals himself to them. If you were the brothers, what would you do? Would you be a little bit scared? Remember, this is more than just a little brotherly roughing him up and, wrestling in the living room. This is beating him up, wanting to leave him for dead, but then at the last second, selling him off into slavery. But Joseph doesn't do that. He has mercy on them. Because Joseph can remember he was shown mercy by who? God. Because God was with him when he was being sold into slavery. He knows that God was with him in the dungeon. He knows God God was with him when he gave him the ability to interpret dreams. So Joseph reveals himself to his brother. They bring the whole family down to live in Egypt. Live in Egypt, and things go so well for them there. The whole family prospers in Egypt. And what I want you to do is I want you to turn to page number 116. All right. So, or I'm sorry, 118. So turn to the beginning of 48. Jacob, remember Israel, will bless Joseph's sons. And then Jacob speaks his last words to his son. And then Jacob is married. So the brothers are thinking to themselves in chapter 49 and 50, they're thinking to themselves, okay, the only reason Joseph was probably nice to us and didn't kill us or mistreat us is because our dad was still alive, but now dad is gone. And he's probably going to turn on us. So, chapter 50, underline it, star it, very important chapter in the Bible. Then Joseph threw himself on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. Joseph commanded the physicians in his service to embalm his father, so the physicians embalmed Israel. They spent 40 days in doing this, for that is the time required for embalming. The Egyptians wept for him 70 days. When the days of weeping for him were past, Joseph addressed the household of Pharaoh. If I have now found favor with you, please speak to Pharaoh as follows. My father made me swear an oath. He said, I am about to die in a tomb that I have hewed out for myself in the land of Canaan. There you shall bury me. Now therefore let me go up, so that I may bury my father. Then I will return. Pharaoh answered, go up and bury your father. So they go up to Israel. But in 15, Genesis 15, Joseph forgives his brothers, realizing that their father was dead. I hope they realized he was dead a few days before now. Joseph's brother said, what if Joseph still bears a grudge and pays us back in full for all the wrong we have done to them? Say to Joseph that Dad told us, I beg you, forgive the crime of your brothers for the wrong they did in harming you. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Underline this. Verse 20. Even though you intended to harm me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people as he is doing today. So, there's evil, there is bad stuff in the world. Does that mean that God is done working? He will bring something good out of it. It's a statement of faith. That even in the bad stuff of this world, God will not let it stay dead. God will not let the bad stuff have sway. God will not let the bad stuff win. He brings something good out of it. Part of forgiving and moving forward in conflict is asking where God is and where God is moving in this situation. Joseph does this, and the cycle is broken. The answer comes from the Spirit moving and allowing forgiveness, reconciliation, and the beginning of something new. So imagine what would have happened if Joseph decides to throw his brothers in the dungeon. There's no reconciliation. There's no forgiveness. And everything keeps going. One side will punish the other. When another side has power, they'll keep punishing over and over and over again. What breaks this? Forgiveness. thing that he learned from the forgiveness that God offered to him when he knew and figured out that he had sinned in being kind of an obnoxious child, taunting his brothers. He learned God's forgiveness and God's desire for life. So he shows forgiveness, and the story ends with things going so well for this family. So we'll break right here, go to your small groups, and your task in your small groups will have about 5-10 minutes or so to come up with 3 questions that each group has. All right? 3 questions on this whole story.
Bailey's group is meeting in Jenny's office.
We'll just pick a room. I don't know where everybody else is going to go.
I'll ring the bell. Yeah. pressing questions that you were not able to answer in your groups? Yes, sir.
So like if they dreamt about like how they're gonna die,
Yeah.
and he told them that they're gonna die in this amount of days, could they like prevent it?
When you're a prisoner, there's not a whole lot you can prevent.
That was our question too.
Okay, but that's a good question. There isn't a whole lot. I mean, the cupbearer is probably really excited, so he's saying, "Yeah, this would be awesome. Let's do this." Baker be a little more tentative. Yes. Okay. Joseph is probably in prison. My guess is for about 5-7 years. Did he think that's a very good question? I think he did, but I think in a much more humble sort of way than he thought of it before. Yep. Sometimes you hear excitement, you forget that some people, it's a human thing. But he did remember in the end, a few years later maybe, but he still remembered. Yes.
Why did they take him so seriously?
Huh?
Why did they take him so seriously?
So seriously, back then, and now it's amazing. They're finding out more and more about dreams. It's our brain sorting things out. But they believed back then, and look how many times in the Bible people have a dream, and it's God's way of talking. And even in the New Testament, God appeared to Joseph in a dream to tell him to get up and leave and go to Egypt to escape Herod. So in the Bible, God definitely communicates, and I think he still does communicate to us in dreams. But we don't really talk about dreams as much as they used to. Good question. Yes?
I was wondering if it was the same Pharaoh as in Moses.
No. Excellent question, though. That is a great foreshadowing question.
Can you repeat questions? Because I don't think the online people can.
Okay. We had a question, I think we had, was this Pharaoh the same Pharaoh that was in Moses' day? Great question. Short answer is no. We'll find more out about that soon. All right. Yes.
Derek and Rylan had a question.
Yes.
How old were his brothers, like when they traded him?
They traded him. My guess from the whole story is it would have varied in age from about 15 to 25. Younger adults. Old enough to know better, as your parents would say. Yes.
How did they get from Israel to Egypt?
Israel to Egypt. Very careful. He was an old man, but they got him there, and he ends up dying. They probably had some version of a cart and brought him in that, because he's not walking that anymore. He's old. Oh, they could have used a camel, but
Donkey.
I have heard that they are very uncomfortable to ride on. Yes.
So back to Moses then, were the Hebrews that were slaves, are they offspring of Joseph's brothers?
Yep. I'm so glad you asked those questions, because that were, yes.
Why do the women not matter?
That's a great
Mine.
Why do
question.
women not matter?
That was mine.
Well, you didn't ask it, so.
Because human beings can be wrong, and we've evolved. All right. You're going to find out a story that women do matter a great deal in this next upcoming story. Because to answer a few of those questions, years pass, years and years and years pass. These are I'm reading from Exodus chapter 1. We're in a brand new book. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his own household. So the Israelites were fruitful and prolific. They multiplied, grew exceedingly strong, and the land was filled with them. a few hundred years after Joseph and his family probably passed over to die. So there are a few generations that lived and things go well in Egypt, and they're in Egypt and they remain there, and this is their homeland. But then all of a sudden there's a new ruler who doesn't know, doesn't remember how Joseph saved Egypt from a famine. Doesn't know that. And is incredibly harsh and worried about this group of foreigners that's getting so numerous. So, a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. This is verse 8, chapter 1 of Exodus, verse 8. Did not know Joseph. He said to his people, look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase in the event of war, join our enemies, and fight against us and escape the land. Therefore, they sent taskmasters over them. He enslaved them. They became slaves. A lot of times, when you see a lot of Egyptian ruins, it was likely that Hebrews built those. It was likely that Hebrews built those. The Egyptians became ruthless in imposing tasks on Israelites, and it made their life bitter. So the king of Egypt, and this is to answer Stacy's question, not to answer the question, but to show women have a huge role in this. The king of Egypt, what is the king of Egypt's name here? Frank, we don't know. We don't know who this king is. He's not named. That's an important detail to remember. The king, the pharaoh, the most powerful person, he is not named. He's not named. So, there's a problem with that. There's a problem that he's not named. Or maybe there's a point. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwife, one of whose name was Shiphrah and the other Puah. Not the greatest of names. But they have names, right? The powerful man in this story is anonymous. He doesn't have a name, but two midwives have names. Two Hebrew midwives have names. When you act as midwives of the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it's a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl, the girl shall live. How many of you know what midwives are? So what are midwives?
They're like not doctors, but just ladies that help you have babies because they just know how it goes.
Exactly. That is exactly, and that's the way it was done for generations. It was that the women were in charge of the medical care during childbirth, because who better to advise you and coach you than somebody who has gone through that whole process. So this is what the midwives were. So the Pharaoh said, if you see that it is a boy, kill it. Why get rid of the boys? Soldiers. For the other army. Exactly. Plus, there are no boys and just females. Can't reproduce, right? Population kind of goes down. But then midwives don't listen. They don't listen to Pharaoh. They stand up to the most powerful person in the land. And guess who is one of those Hebrew boys that's born? Any guesses who one of those Hebrew boys that are born are? Moses. Moses is born. Moses is born, and when he's a little baby, his mom says, you know, eventually they're going to find out and they're going to be after us, so let's put him in a basket and hope for the best. So they do this. They put him in a reed basket, put him in the Nile. Guess where he ends up? Fortunately, not in an alligator's mouth. But that would have been a very real option. He floats on down. The Pharaoh's daughter happened to They circumcised boys on the 8th day. So Moses was circumcised. So she draws him up and she can see, oh, this is one of the Hebrew babies. So what does she do? Does she run and go tell Dad?
No.
No! Here again is a woman that's standing up to the most powerful man, and she said, I'm going to take him as my own and raise him as one of my own, and Dad will never know. He'll never be any wiser. He'll just say, it's a boy that you adopted. Oh, great, wonderful. And he was raised in this court. So it was saved by the acts of 3 courageous women. Absolutely incredible. So, women may not have the power, but women are definitely a part, and a major part of this story. So one day, though, Moses sees an Egyptian taskmaster beating on a Hebrew slave. And Moses gets upset and kills him. So even though he's raised in Pharaoh's household, he's still guilty of murder. So he's a fugitive. He's on the run. So we will pick it up from there next time. All right? We're back up on schedule now. Yep. So snow days, schmo days, doesn't mean anything.
Is it our sensory test or?
Next time, a week from now, will be 7th grade.
Nope.
There's no confirmation next week.
No, the next time we meet.
So no confirmation next week?
Yes.
But the
Following
following
week,
week, it's.
7th grade.
7th, 8th, and 9th, on the 18th.
What?
On the
18th?
25th, sorry.
25th. 7th, 8th, and 9th on the 25th.
So in 2 weeks, you guys all come back here again together.
Yeah. And we will have a very special game show. All right? Thank you, guys. We are caught up, and we'll learn